Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely mesmerizing. We're diving deep into the profound spiritual lessons hiding right in plain sight within Fujii Kaze's It's Alright music video. This isn't just another catchy tune. It's literally a visual map of the human soul's journey. We're going to decode the exact symbology of the lotus rising from the mud, explore the ancient concepts baked right into the visuals, and connect it all back to our modern lives. It's a gorgeous puzzle, so let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this. The entire narrative is anchored by one very famous, absolutely crucial spiritual truth: no mud, no lotus. Basically, liberation and awakening, they don't just happen in a vacuum. We actually have to refine our obstacles. The source compares all of us, all sentient beings, to lotuses. And, just like a lotus growing in a murky pond, we start off as these underwater beings who need guidance based on our own unique capacities. That guidance could be demonstrating, coaching, mentoring, whatever it takes to act as that catalyst to push us through the dark and finally break the surface. Section 1. The mud. The 8 worldly conditions. So what actually is this mud we're supposed to be growing out of? Well, in our day-to-day lives, we're not talking about physical dirt. It's the pressure of simply existing in the modern world, which is represented here by the 8 worldly conditions. On one side, you've got the desirable stuff: gain, status, praise, pleasure. On the other side, the undesirable: loss, obscurity, blame, and pain. Now, you'd naturally think the mud is only the bad stuff, right? The loss and the pain. But, and this is a real game changer, the source points out that even the positive conditions, the gain and the praise, act as their own kind of mud. Why? Because they're fleeting. They act as temporary masks of false happiness that often cover up an underlying, pretty crushing sorrow. So yeah, both columns, they're both the mud. Which brings us to one of the most striking visuals in the narrative: a cracking stone statue shedding tears. This perfectly hits the nail on the head when it comes to that feeling of smiling on the outside while grieving within. I mean, think about how relatable that is. You achieve the status, you get the praise, those desirable conditions we just looked at, but it's a super fragile success. The stone statue represents that rigid, perfect mask we put on for the world, while the tears show the hidden grief when we realize that worldly success doesn't actually cure our internal suffering. Now, what's really interesting about this concept is how those tears are actually used. The tears from the statue literally become food for a figure known as the long-necked ghost. This is such a brilliant way of translating abstract Buddhist concepts into relatable human psychology. The ghost represents tanha, which means craving, and it works right alongside moha, or delusion, and harbors dosa, which is that aversion or anger we feel when our happiness inevitably fades. So, our hidden sorrow, our tears, are actually feeding our own cravings and delusions. Crazy, right? And the symbolism just gets richer. Notice how this ghost is tending to 2 geese, a black goose representing sorrow and a white goose representing joy. The ghost tends to both, because in this realm of craving, joy and sorrow are totally inseparable. You literally cannot have the worldly joy without the worldly sorrow following right behind it. Meanwhile, the source points out that butterflies drift aimlessly nearby. These butterflies symbolize human intellect and virtue. They're beautiful, sure, but in a world dominated by the heavy defilements of the ghost, human intellect just kind of drifts around, totally unable to find true north.
Section 2. The cultivation. Seeds in the suffering.
Way deep down in that mud is a nursery for what the source calls sweet, wasted lotus seeds. These seeds represent human beings who are actively seeking a way out of the suffering. And here's where it gets really beautiful. The wind carries fertilizer down to them. But what is the fertilizer? It's the suffering itself. The suffering, the defilements, and the seeds of enlightenment all mix together to nourish these lotus seeds as they develop in the mud. The visual symbolizes the spiritual evolution through the act of dancing. They're literally using the hardship itself to evolve and grow. But this growth isn't a solo mission. The source emphasizes that this development relies heavily on Kalyanamitra, or spiritual friendship, acting as a sort of compass toward goodness through specific blessings. It means actively avoiding fools, seeking out the wise, and honoring those who are truly worthy of honor. Actually, scratch that, it's not just ancient rules. These are highly practical steps. By surrounding ourselves with the right influences, these seeds can finally navigate through the dark mud. So let's take a quick breath here. How does a seed actually transcend the mud? We know it has the fertilizer of suffering. We know it has the compass of wise friends. But what's the actual mechanism? How does a soul finally break free from those 8 worldly conditions and rise above the water? Section 3. The Awakening, Rising Above the Water. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact moment the lotus seeds reach their full potential. They don't just bloom. The Source describes them as becoming fixed stars, shining with their own light, awakened by pure wisdom. This is the ultimate climax, the equivalent of the lotus finally breaking the water's surface. They aren't underwater beings drifting aimlessly anymore. They are illuminated from the inside out. They've used the mud, navigated the craving, and completely broken through to clarity. Section 4. The Universal Reality, Following the Natural Course. Now, everything we've just discussed, the mud, the statue, the ghosts, the seeds, the stars, the Source reveals that every single movement of this actually unfolds within a tiny bonsai of Mount Meru, the sacred cosmic mountain of ancient mythology. And who's holding this bonsai? It's held by an Atman, a universal spirit or higher self, presented in the likeness of Fujii Kaze himself. It's a staggering image. It shows us that our entire journey of suffering and awakening is contained, held safely in the hands of the universal spirit. The mechanics of this universal reality really come down to irap tapa chaiwata, or condition genesis. It's basically the principle that when this exists, that comes to be. The emergence of our suffering, our defilements, and our eventual awakening, it's not an accident. It's a deeply interconnected cycle. The mud exists, so the lotus comes to be. The suffering exists, so the awakening comes to be. Every single part depends entirely on the other, driven toward a greater understanding. So the crucial point is summarized beautifully in this idea: suffering is the fertilizer and pain is the teacher. The Source concludes that life and samsara, the cycle of rebirth, are constructs of causal factors that are completely perfect and complete within themselves. When we finally realize this, the phrase, "it's all right," stops being just some simple consolation to make us feel better. It transforms into this profound, deep acceptance of reality. It's the ultimate realization that nothing is fundamentally broken. Everything is following its natural course. And once the heart accepts this truth, peace and awakening just naturally emerge from the reality that, well, there is no mud, no lotus. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself, what mud in your own life right now, what difficulties or worldly pressures might actually be acting as the perfect fertilizer for your future awakening? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating journey of the soul of me, and I encourage you to keep finding the lotus in the mud.